January 6, 2001 was supposed to be a day of new beginnings for 32-year-old Pamela Shelley, as she planned to leave her home in DeWitt County, move to Arkansas, and start a new life with her 12-year-old daughter Kayla and 9-year-old son Dustin. But just 20 minutes before she was set to depart, tragedy struck. Pamela was shot in the head in the bathroom of the house she shared with her boyfriend, 41-year-old Ronnie Hendrick. What really happened on that fateful day? Why was Pam shot? And by whom? Welcome to Real Crime Storytime, where we cover solved, unsolved, and mysterious cases from around the world. Today we delve into the unsolved murder of Pamela Shelley, a case that has left investigators scratching their heads for over 2 decades. But first, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please hit the subscribe and like buttons. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into the mystery. Cuero, DeWitt County, Texas, is a quaint little town in the heart of Lone Star State. With a population of just over 20,000, this tight-knit community is known for its friendly locals, rich history, and breathtaking scenery. Surrounded by sprawling ranches and vast stretches of farmland, DeWitt County is a place where time seems to stand still. The beauty of DeWitt County lies in its unspoiled natural landscapes. Rolling hills stretch as far as the eye can see, adorned with vibrant wildflowers that paint the countryside in a kaleidoscope of colors. People are always drawn to take a leisurely stroll along the serene Guadalupe River, where the gentle current invites them to dip their toes or try their hand at fishing. But this small, tight-knit community was rocked by the brutal murder of Pam Shelley in 2001, a woman who had only been living in their midst for a few short months. In the year of 1969, in the small town of Ashdown, Arkansas, a bright and caring girl named Pamela Shelley was born in a hard-working family. Her father was a lodging truck driver, while her mother worked in a nursing home. Despite the struggles of living in a small town, Pamela never lost her friendly demeanor and always went out of her way to be kind to those around her. At the tender age of 16, in 1985, Pam met her first husband, Jesse Suggs. They immediately hit it off and discussed getting married someday. However, Pam's father insisted that she finish high school first. So, after graduation, Pam and Jesse tied the knot and started a family. In 1989, 2 years after their marriage, they had a daughter named Kayla, but unfortunately, their marriage was marred by Jesse's issues with drugs and crime, leading to their eventual divorce. Pamela's next marriage was in 1991 to a man named Gary, but it was short-lived, lasting only a year. She briefly reunited with Jesse before moving back in with her parents. However, fate had other plans for Pam, as she soon reconnected with her childhood friend, Ronnie Hendrick. Despite not having seen each other for over a decade, their connection was still strong, and they soon started dating. In 1992, she had a son with Ronnie named Dustin. Ronnie asked Pam and her children to move with him to Cuero, Texas, and after some consideration, Pam agreed. Pam, her son Dustin, and Ronnie made the long drive to Cuero in the summer of 2000. Ronnie's family lived in the area, including his mother, Deborah. At first, things seemed to be going well, but tensions soon arose when Pam's daughter Kayla joined them a few months later. Kayla clashed with Ronnie, often refusing to help around the house and demanding to be sent back to Arkansas to be with her father. This caused a strain on Pam and Ronnie's relationship, leading to frequent arguments. Despite the turmoil, Pam remained devoted to Ronnie and her children. She had been living with Ronnie on rural property in DeWitt County, just a mile away from Ronnie's mother and stepfather. Pam had only been in Texas for 5 months, but her life had already been turned upside down by the turmoil surrounding her and her family. Tragedy struck when Pam was shot 800 miles away from her home and family in Arkansas in January 2001. On the bitterly cold evening of January 6, 2001, at 5 p.m., Pamela Shelley, her 9-year-old son Dustin, and 12-year-old daughter Kayla, all preparing to leave the rural Texas property they shared with Pamela's boyfriend, Ronnie Hendrick. It had been a tumultuous few months for the family, with constant bickering and arguments between Kayla and Pam and Ronnie also having their fair share of disagreements. Just 20 minutes before they were scheduled to leave and head back to their home state of Arkansas, tragedy struck. A single gunshot rang out, shattering the peaceful calm of the countryside. Ronnie immediately called 911 and told the DeWitt County Police that he heard the shot and didn't know what was going on. When the authorities arrived at the scene, they found Pam lying on the bathroom floor with a gunshot wound to the head. Blood was everywhere, and the gun was sitting on the counter, almost as if it had been placed there deliberately. The first responders were stunned and immediately began tending to Pam. They told Ronnie that it would take at least an hour to get to the nearest hospital, but he insisted he knew a shorter backroads route and volunteered to drive the ambulance to the hospital himself. Pam was clinging to life, but was still alive when they took her away. Tragically, Pam succumbed to her injuries and passed away at the hospital. The news was grim, and now the focus turned to finding out what happened. The following day, Pam's ex-husband Jesse arrived at the hospital and took the children back to Arkansas. The story of Pam's death is one of the most gripping and harrowing stories you could ever hear. The initial investigation was marred by the misinformation provided by Ronnie's family members. They painted a picture of a deeply troubled woman with a history of mental illness and suicide attempts. This narrative was eagerly embraced by the police, who were quick to believe that Pam had taken her own life. The medical examiner's ruling only served to reinforce this narrative. The ME was given a crooked version of events from the scene of the crime. They were told that Pam was a troubled and unhappy soul with a long history of mental illness. Ronnie, her boyfriend, claimed that she had taken her own life. The medical examiner observed that the gunshot wound was a contact wound to the right temple area, traveling front to back, down to up, and right to left, a classic self-inflicted wound. The autopsy confirmed that Pam's death was indeed self-inflicted. In the aftermath of Pam's death, the people of DeWitt County were left with more questions than answers. For 7 long years, the case remained cold, the trail growing colder with each passing day. Finally, all but Carl Bowen had given up on Pamela Shelley. In 2008, Carl Bowen was a newly appointed investigator under the supervision of DeWitt County Sheriff Jody Zaveski, who was not in office during the time of the shooting in 2001. However, Carl was part of the law enforcement team at that time and had some knowledge of the case. He was troubled by the fact that Hendrick was not subjected to a polygraph test and had vanished after the incident. Carl had suspicions about the credibility of Ronnie's account for all these years, and he finally had the opportunity to address them. He discussed reopening the cold case with Sheriff Zaveski. For Carl, it was an itch he could not ignore, a nagging feeling that something was not right, that there was more to this case than meets the eye, and so he took it upon himself to seek out the truth and bring justice to a grieving family. When, in the summer of 2008, Ronnie Hendrick was arrested for a domestic abuse charge against his girlfriend and brought to DeWitt County Jail, it was an opportunity Carl could not pass up. He saw a chance to uncover the secrets that had been buried for so long, to get to the bottom of what had really happened to Pam. And so he approached Ronnie, a man with a troubled past, a history of violence and addiction, and convinced him to take a polygraph test. The results were clear. Deception. Ronnie had been lying all these years, concealing the truth behind a web of lies and half-truths. But Carl did not stop there. He dug deeper, speaking to witnesses, gathering evidence, piecing together a case that would finally bring the truth to light. And what he found was damning. A pattern of abuse, a history of violence, and a man who had fled to the other side of the country, hoping to escape the consequences of his actions. But Carl was relentless, driven by a sense of duty and a need to see justice done. Ronnie Hendrick had a troubled past, with a history of alcohol abuse and domestic violence. He had been arrested several times for domestic violence, including a charge in 2008 that led to his encounter with Detective Carl Bowen, who reopened the case. Hendrick was born in Texas in 1960 and had a difficult upbringing. His father died when he was young, and he was raised by his mother, who struggled to support the family. Hendrick dropped out of high school and began working as a mechanic, but his problems with alcohol soon began to affect his job and personal life. In addition to his domestic violence charges, Hendrick had been convicted of several other crimes over the years, including drug possession and DWI. At the time of Pam Shelley's death, he was out on parole after serving time in a South Dakota prison for a DWI conviction. During the investigation into Pam's death, Hendrick initially claimed that she had committed suicide, but eventually changed his story, admitting to being in the room with her when she died, but denying that he had killed her. However, as Detective Bowen dug deeper into the case, he uncovered a significant amount of circumstantial evidence that pointed to Hendrick as the killer. In addition to the inconsistencies in Hendrick's story, Bowen spoke with witnesses who had seen Hendrick and Pam arguing in the hours before her death. He also discovered that Hendrick had left the state immediately after Pam's death, a fact that suggested he was trying to avoid being caught. After the case had been reopened, Carl Bowen reached out to the TV show Cold Justice for assistance in investigating Pam's death. Cold Justice is a true crime show that investigates cold cases and collaborates with local law enforcement agencies to help solve them. The show's hosts, former prosecutor Kelly Siegler and former crime scene investigator Yolanda McClary, teamed up with Carl Bowen and DeWitt County Sheriff's Office to take a fresh look at the case. The Cold Justice team arrived in DeWitt County in December 2012 and spent several weeks reviewing the evidence and conducting interviews. They were able to uncover new information and interview witnesses who had not been previously interviewed. The team also brought in a ballistics expert to examine the gun that was found next to Pam's body. The ballistics expert found that the gun had been fired twice, contradicting Ronnie Hendrick's claim that he had only heard one shot. The team also found discrepancies in the stories that Ronnie's family members had told the police, including an alleged suicide note that had never been found. Furthermore, the team discovered that Ronnie had a history of domestic violence and had been convicted of several crimes, including felony DWI. The Cold Justice team's findings were presented to a grand jury in May 2013, and Ronnie Hendrick was indicted for Pam's murder. He was apprehended in the picturesque state of South Dakota, where he had cunningly established a secret residence under an assumed identity, only to be forcefully transported across state lines to Texas, where the legal proceedings awaited his presence in the courtroom. After years of investigation, in 2012, the medical examiner changed the cause of Pam's death from suicide to undetermined. This was a significant development in the case because it opened the possibility that Pam's death may have been a homicide. Ronnie Hendrick was eventually indicted on murder charges in connection to Pam's death, and his trial was set for September 2013. However, a TV program called Cold Justice aired an episode about the case one day before jury selection. This caused concern among the legal team, who worried that the program's biased opinions could influence potential jurors. Consequently, the judge declared a mistrial and the trial was postponed. In October 2014, Ronnie Hendrick was found guilty of the murder of Pamela Shelley and sentenced to 75 years in prison. Despite the setback, the prosecution offered Ronnie Hendrick a plea deal of 22 years in prison, which he accepted. Despite taking the plea deal, Ronnie maintains his innocence and denies any involvement in Pam's death. Kayla, Pam's daughter, forgave Ronnie, but she still struggles to understand why he would accept the plea deal if he was innocent. The case remains a tragic and heartbreaking one, and the people who loved Pam continue to grapple with the reality of her death. The case of Pamela Shelley's death is a tragic reminder of the devastating impact of domestic abuse and the importance of seeking justice for victims. Thanks to the tireless efforts of investigators like Carl Bowen and the team from Cold Justice, the truth about what happened to Pam was finally revealed. While Ronnie Hendrick may maintain his innocence, The evidence presented at trial and his acceptance of a plea deal suggest otherwise. How do you think the tireless efforts of investigators like Carl Bowen and the Cold Justice team impacted the outcome of this case? Do you believe Ronnie Hendrick's claim of innocence holds merit, considering the evidence presented at trial and his decision to accept a plea deal? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and please share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true crime content, and as always, stay safe.